Hi everybody, just Jessica here. Hey, check out my new training and other videos on YouTube and check out my website at jessica-humphreys.com. Jessica-Humphreys, Humphrys.com. You can also find Just Jessica on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So today, I already did part 1, 101.1, the CRO sales training as an overview. Today is 101.2 and CRO sales training, and I'll focus on high-level pharmaceutical development, GLPs, and INDs. What is a GLP? GLP stands for Good Laboratory Practices, and they are the biggest driver of quality process in the CRO industry for the whole drug development world. GCP is a clinical term. GMP is a manufacturing term. So we're talking about GLP, Good Laboratory Practices. GLPs are a set of guidelines established by the FDA to help assure consistency and accuracy of safety and toxicity testing. GLPs will define the design, the conduct, and also the reporting that are required for IND-enabling safety and toxicology studies. The GLPs really took an upswing and came to play back in the 60s with the whole thalidomide crisis. That was the drug that was given to lots of pregnant women for morning sickness, and those babies were born, many of them missing long bones and basically having no arms or no legs. I think the crisis was bigger elsewhere internationally, but the U.S. recognized this as a need and to just really step up the game for regulating this world of drug development. As far as GLPs and your clients go, and being a sales rep in this industry, have your PowerPoint and be ready to use it. But I got to tell you, I probably in 5 years, the last 5 years of doing this, I might have pulled my PowerPoint out maybe 5 times, and probably 3 of those times were prearranged, lunch and learn type meetings with an entire group or department of people there with me. So normally you're going to find you're having a one-on-one or one-on-two type of conversation, and pulling out that PowerPoint sometimes changes the whole dynamic of the quality of the conversation. And personally, I prefer just to engage and discuss and talk and sort of leave it a little more open. When you're new, though, the PowerPoint is great for staying organized and making sure you have all of your information there. So I recommend printing it out, making some notes on there to help you elaborate as you're new and you're learning. Also write down questions that you intend to ask your sponsors as you're with them to help uncover their needs. So questions are important, so start figuring out what your questions are. Focus on asking the questions rather than actually presenting your capabilities to uncover how much work they've already done, what they already know, what they've done in vitro versus in vivo, and really get a firm feel for where they are in the process. You should only be talking in these meetings with sponsors as a CRO sales rep probably 25% of the time. And it's your goal to steer that conversation where you want it and find out as much as you can from your sponsors, because again, this is a technically heavy world, and it's very process driven, but the process is huge and cumbersome. So find out as much as you can, and you can't do that if you're talking the whole time. Ask your sponsors if they've ever gone through an IND process before, if they've ever developed a drug, ever written an IND, ever filed an IND, ever made it to the clinic. Figure out where they are with their experience, because many folks will be new at this, and you will find that maybe very quickly you know more than they do, and you can help guide them and steer them around some of the pitfalls that you already know to exist. Determine when they plan to file their IND. And then you have to work backwards from that point as far as scheduling the studies and the whole timeline and everything. Ask them if they've had a pre-IND meeting yet with the FDA. This is something the FDA offers to everyone that's developing a new drug, a new vaccine, a new whatever, to go in, present what it is you intend to do as your development plan, tell them about your drug, tell them your intentions for testing, and this is your opportunity to get insight and feedback from the FDA. So sponsors should be taking advantage of this. Some that are new especially may not realize the importance and significance of this, or they may not know that they are entitled to have this meeting. So you can steer them appropriately and tell them that they should be doing this, and it is available to them, and it's valuable, and and that they should get one scheduled if they haven't. If they have had a pre-IND meeting, ask them what the FDA told them. Ask them what they learned. What is an IND? An IND stands for an investigational new drug. So a successful IND is the primary goal of every person in preclinical drug development. It's their goal. They show the efficacy, they show safety, and then they file an IND to get FDA approval to start phase 1 human clinical trials. An NDA, conversely, is a new drug application, which is the final application at the end of millions of dollars, lots of time, lots of people, lots of clinical studies that's getting filed to get the final FDA approval to actually take the drug to market. So we're not going to be talking about NDA, the NDA part of this today. We'll stick with the preclinical, pre-IND portion of these programs. Sponsors don't always know what you think they might know. Don't assume. Ask questions. Try to figure out, where their knowledge base is, so you have a good idea coming in. What questions to ask and all of these things. I had a guy call me once. This is a great story. It still cracks me up. Calls me. I answer the phone. He determines that I'm the right person to talk with that can help him, and he proceeds to tell me about all these wonderful in vitro assays that his team has developed. Some others that another company has that they can use. All of these wonderful in vitro assays that they're going to use and execute GLP to support their IND filing. So I say, what? You're not planning to do any animal studies to file your IND? And he says, no, we're trying to avoid that. I said, well, yes, aren't we all? But this is the established FDA process. What makes you think you're going to escape this? I thought, well, maybe this drug is already approved for another indication. Maybe there's some extenuating circumstance I'm unaware of. But there were no extenuating circumstances. And the bottom line is, the sponsor was feeling very hopeful, but they were very uneducated on the process and what the expectations of the FDA were. So as a sales rep, I was able to educate them and hopefully steer them in the right direction before they wasted too much more time making this their plan. Obviously, I think we'd all agree in a perfect world that we didn't do testing on animals. However, current laws and regulations are in place at this time because it is the best and only way to determine the toxicity and safety of any of these compounds before they can go into human clinical testing. Like Kitty has joined us in the back here. What does an IND program look like? A number of factors affect the design of these programs, and it will take you time to learn the flow and the nuances. Be patient. I will say it once, probably 5 times in the course of this video. Selling in the CRO world to all of the diverse client types and everything that you have out there, there's a huge learning curve. So it takes time, and it takes getting good at asking questions. So there's a lot of factors that will affect the design of what these IND programs look like, and starts with the type of compound that it is. First of all, there's small molecule drugs. There are the large molecule biologic drugs and vaccines, and all of them have different required testing parameters. The target disease will impact the duration and the amount of testing that needs to be done on these compounds. For example, a drug that's being used to treat hair loss is going to be looked at with a different level of scrutiny because maybe it wouldn't be considered terribly necessary as compared to a potentially life-saving cancer drug. The development plan is going to look different for both. The dosing frequency and duration, as far as the intended use in a clinical setting, is this going to be given acutely, say 1 to 2 times for a brain bleed in a trauma unit in an emergency department, or is this something that's going to be used, say, for arthritis, that's going to be chronically used daily for many, many years? Again, testing parameters to assess safety and toxicity are going to be done differently. And one program is going to be a lot more expensive. Just figure, for the most part, that small molecule drugs are potentially the most toxic, with vaccines being on the other end as being, potentially the least toxic, with biologics pretty much falling somewhere in the middle. The depth, the extent, and the cost of these programs will pretty much reflect this statement. IND-related dialogue that you're going to be having with your sponsors, it's going to be diverse. You will hear people say, hey, I need a tox study, salesperson. Get me a quote for a tox study. Well, there's really no such thing as just a tox study. As I just very briefly pointed out, depending on the type of compound, the indication, the intended frequency and duration of use. All of these things are going to greatly impact what the design of any toxin safety studies and IND programs look like. So either you need to ask some well-crafted questions in order to help them elaborate for you, or it's very possible that you might need to bring, especially when you're new, you will need to bring a toxicologist into this conversation early on to sort of help guide and steer and design this program so that you can in turn give these folks an accurate quote. Because one IND program for an acute use drug might be a 1-month tox study, whereas something that's going to be more chronic could even just for an IND require a 3-month tox study, again, depending on what the design of your clinical phase 1, phase 2 programs look like. Now, it took me double-digit years to start sounding enough like a toxicologist for the toxicologists in the room to start squirming. So be patient. It's a huge learning curve. I can tell you I still have no plans for my DABT or anything, though. So at the early phases, going through this with your sponsors, you need to also ask them just Jessica. You need to also ask them about formulations, the CMC and the manufacturing part of this. They need to have enough quality compound consistently produced in some fashion, hopefully with some certificates of analysis and some other quality controls in place. They need to have enough quality compound to do this program, to do the IND program. GMP material is not required for GLP studies, but it is required for clinical phase 1 studies, and those happen very promptly following these IND programs and the filing of an IND. Once an IND is filed, unless the FDA actually reviews that information and puts these folks on a clinical hold, basically after 30 days, no news is good news, and they're clear to proceed with phase 1 clinical trials. So hopefully, and most likely, they are planning these IND programs and their phase 1 trials and the manufacturing part of this to support both of those. They're planning this all in tandem. So you need to be aware of that as far as being aware of what their world actually includes and entails from a budgetary perspective, a timing perspective, and all of those things. Also, in the course of talking about the formulations and compound, making sure you sort of have the sponsors thinking about the things they need moving into these IND programs, there's a bioanalytical method. Now, this should have been something that was developed along the way, first and foremost with the CMC folks and the chemistry people, and it should have been modified, qualified for use with, say, at least some mice and rats and maybe another species so far, but don't count on the fact that much has been done with it. It may be possible that no pharmacokinetic type information has been collected yet. We're hoping it has. So these methods are going to need fine-tuned. They're going to need set up in the CRO's lab. They're going to need to be qualified for the particular species they're going to be used in. And they need to be qualified for the particular type of matrix they're going to be used to analyze, whether it's, say, blood or urine or whatever. Excuse me. Setting up these methods and also formulations and making sure they have the right formulations that are even just able to be dissolved, to be injected into animals or given to animals. These are amazing stumpers. And delay and things that delay these programs hugely for people, formulations and bioanalytical methods. So these things do need talked about up front, and these details need ironed out because most of this has to all be figured out before the in-life studies can start. Your biggest weapon is always going to be the ability to understand this process, ask the right questions, and then communicate to the sponsor how it is that you're going to help them mitigate the risks and pitfalls of these programs while saving them, of course, time and money. So the actual IND program, what does it look like? I call this the IND trilogy. It starts out, the most expensive piece of this that's probably not going to be done first is the repeat dose toxicology studies. And what the FDA says about that is 1 rodent and 1 non-rodent species. These studies, again, depending on what the phase 1 and 2 clinical trials look like, these tox studies can be anywhere from 1 to 6 months. The tox study has to go at least as long as what the intended clinical duration is during whatever part of clinical development this data is to support. At some point, typically during clinical development, especially for chronic indications, drugs that are going to be used chronically, there are 9, 12, and even longer month tox studies that then have to be executed. The second part of this trilogy is genetic toxicology, looking for the ability of these compounds to cause any kind of genetic damage. There are laboratory-based studies. There are also animal-based studies for these. The third part of this trilogy is safety pharmacology, and it in and of itself has 3 components, and that's your cardiovascular safety assessment, your respiratory safety assessments, and your neurological safety assessments. Sometimes parts of these can be piggybacked into the tox studies to sort of streamline costs and time and minimize the use of animals. A toxicologist or a good regulatory consultant can certainly talk through that with you. There are actually a whole lot of studies. Again, I've very much oversimplified this, if you will, but for the purposes of this being a beginner level type of information, there are a lot of non-GLP studies that sort of set the stage and set the parameters for what these IND programs are going to look like. So we haven't even talked about those, but they're vitally important as well. Some CROs specialize in non-GLP studies only. If the CRO that you work for is selling GLP studies, that's where the bigger money is. And so rest assured, as a salesperson, that's where they're going to want you to spend your time. It's often, you're going to find if you are selling these toxin safety GLP programs, it's going to be the most commoditized and the most competitive service that you're offering. So you need to work on understanding your differentiators and all of these things very clearly. Know your weaknesses, know your strengths as far as your team goes, and then have some understanding also of how your competition is working and executing in the space. Entire courses are taught on this stuff, so I hope this is enough to get you started today. We will dig into all of these things more and in more detail as I get to 200 and 300 level type presentations. I've been doing this for 15 years, but my intention at this time for these 100 level presentations is to keep it simple and supportive of the person that's really very new to all of this information. I got to tell you, when the first CRO called me about interviewing, and it's the first one that hired me, I didn't know who this company was, and I didn't know what a CRO was. And this is one of the still biggest 2 CROs out there, and I had never heard of them. It's a niche industry, and if you've never worked as a sales rep in this industry, it's challenging, it's diverse, it's exciting, and it's interesting. So, but there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn. So I'm happy for your feedback. I'd be happy to hear from you. Tell me if you think I have accomplished keeping this appropriately simple yet helpful or not. I'm also happy for any suggestions on any specific topics you'd like to see me cover. I certainly am open to taking requests. Thank you for your attention and your interest in what I have to say today. I can be reached by phone at 717-668-3133, by email at jessica@jessica-humphreys.com. That's Jessica at Jessica, Jessica-Humphreys, HUMPHREYS.com. Check out my other videos on YouTube as well as my blog on my website at jessica-humphreys.com/blog. And look forward to hearing from anybody that wants to reach out. Thanks again. Bye-bye.